She is a heroine to some. As a fighter for black rights, she is a villain to others. Back in the 1970s, Assata Shakur was known as the soul of the self-styled Black Liberation Army, an armed group implicated in the of several police officers. Her name is Assata Shakur. In the United States, she is known by the police and FBI as Joanne Chesimard, one of the nation's most wanted fugitives. Wanted for what police describe as the cold-blooded execution of a New Jersey state trooper back in the 70s. She denies it and says of the state cops,
they want to just kill me. They want to see me dead.
Chesimard was convicted in the killing of Trooper Werner Foster and the wounding of another trooper in a furious shootout on the New Jersey Turnpike in East Brunswick. That's where Chesimard was wounded, and one of two men in the car with her was After her capture in that deadly shootout, she was sentenced to life in prison. In 1979, with the help of 3 armed men, she broke out of the women's prison in Clinton, New Jersey.
She made her break this afternoon from the prison in Clinton, New Jersey.
Chesimard went underground and then surfaced in the 1980s in Cuba under Fidel Castro's protection. Now, at 50 and a grandmother, she agreed to talk with me in Havana.
Ralph Penza, the New York City broadcaster whose reporting helped authorities locate a convicted killer hiding in Cuba. In February 1998, while covering Pope John Paul's trip to Cuba, Penza located Assata, convicted of New Jersey State Trooper Werner Foster in '74. Despite a congressional resolution asking Cuba for her extradition, Assata is at large today. So the FBI asking the public for help with her arrest doesn't make any sense. If the reporter Ralph Penza located her with no success, that means the $1 million reward is bogus and is just an added bonus to make this scripted event appear real. Here's another bogus story as it relates to Assata's.
It's been 43 years since Cuba gave Charlie Hill asylum. He admits hijacking a TWA airliner to get here. He's more cautious about whether he had a role in the of a New Mexico state police officer.
The fugitives hijacked an airplane, and Assata took a boat to Cuba after killing a police officer. But how does a fugitive know that once they arrive in Cuba, that they will be able to stay and not be extradited? After all, they would have entered the country illegally, without a visa, permission, etc. They could have sent them straight back. Also, if they got there and just decided to hide, they wouldn't have legal rights to live there, and wouldn't be able to claim any government money or get a legal job to support themselves. I find it fascinating that Assata and other fugitives fled to Cuba, especially as it's so close to the state of Florida without any real planning on once they get there. But then again, the public will not question these things. As long as it's reported by the news, it will be believed by the masses. As we stated before, Tupac comes from a long line of CIA agents, spies, Freemasons, etc. One thing I noticed, Tupac being a white cop storyline was taken directly from Assata.
I knew, they were coming by me and saying, is she dead yet? Is she dead yet? And I was later taken to a hospital, and I was beaten. I was tortured.
I was behind bars getting beat up by the police department. I got a $10 million lawsuit. They did not see me on TV with my eye busted, my head busted. There's pictures of those.
In Oakland,
yes, in Oakland. You don't see them pictures.
Absolutely false. Our investigation shows that Joanne Chesimard initiated the conflict. She reached into her pocketbook, pulled out a 9mm weapon and started firing at Trooper Harper.
2 carloads of people pulled up, and the first person that stepped towards me had a pistol sticking out of his belt. When I heard gunshots ringing out, I felt one of them strike me in the back in my waist area. I thought it was crazy. The famous singer will be out someone in the back.
Also, it said she broke out of a women's prison in Clinton, New Jersey. Where was Tupac sentenced? Clinton Correctional Facilities.
It's a period of incarceration at Clinton Correctional Facility.
She broke out of the women's prison in Clinton, New Jersey.
She made her break this afternoon.
17 women in that building. They pulled guns, were able to overpower a couple of officers, a male and female officer, and get her out. Put the officers in the back of the van, and they drove the van across an unfenced area in back of the institution to the adjoining Hunterdon State School. There they got out of the van and fled in vehicle or vehicles, and the officers freed themselves and were uninjured.
How were they able to get in here with guns?
That's part of the investigation.
There's a sign right there that says anyone coming in is subject to being searched.
That's true. I don't know how they did it.
Well, then you must have identities on them.
Yes. That's why they're looking for them. I don't have them. The state police are doing the investigation. Not with Chesimard, and Chesimard are considered armed and dangerous.
Booking photographs. During this time, the arrested person is required to hold a placard with name, booking ID, weight, and other relevant information on it. Once the photos are taken, the ID officer will review them before processing to ensure accuracy. The front view photograph shall include a placard positioned in front of the inmate, either by use of the department's computer identification program, handheld or stand, with the top of the placard at the neckline. However, looking at Assada's mugshot, we notice they're covering all of her jail info. This would be considered a violation. It leaves the question, why? We also found another mugshot with the information uncovered, but it leaves one to think. Why are they taking multiple photos? Maybe one for the media, but that doesn't make sense. Her info is hiding some information. Maybe her inmate number is non-existent. This was clearly a staged photo shoot. And in all of these older scripted events, they used the number 33. Looking at the top of the mugshot, it says circular number 33. They gave all of our parents the hoax code. In fact, her case is filled with 33s, but for the sake of time, let's listen to Assada herself.
So, in 1979, after being sentenced by an all-white, convicted by an all-white jury, and sentenced to life in prison plus 33 years plus 30 days.
And sentenced to life in prison plus 33 years plus 30 days.
I think Assada, not making many appearances about her case, is due to the fact she's not a very good actor. She struggles to remember her life as she reads it. With such a dramatic experience, such as being in a shootout with cops, breaking out of a maximum security prison, escaping by boat, this should be something she can repeat in detail with no problems. In a well-produced documentary, they're able to cut and retake to make the story believable. But in a live setting such as this, there are no do-overs. She struggles.
I was able to escape in 1979, and in 1984 I was able to come to Cuba, and the Cuban people and the Cuban government welcomed me with open arms. So I was one of those people, and lucky enough I was part of a movement.
Being sentenced by an all-white, convicted by an all-white jury, convicted by an all-white jury.
Chesimard went underground and then surfaced in the 1980s in Cuba.
She escaped from prison in 1979 and fled to Cuba. The distance from New Jersey to Havana, Cuba is 1,295 miles. How did she hop the border without getting noticed? The United States has one of the most heavily surveilled borders on Earth. No one noticed her. Whether she traveled by foot, by plane, or by train, she would have been noticed, especially given how much media attention she was receiving. No one can travel 1,300 miles without a single soul recognizing them after their face has been plastered all over television. Cuba is across the ocean and is not topographically connected to the United States, which means that she would be required to take a boat or ferry to enter the island. You can't just enter Cuba. It's an island, guarded in its entirety on every corner by the Border Patrol. How did someone labeled as a terrorist who is deemed a threat to all governments and national security get to slide into a country ruled by a fascist dictator who literally kicked terrorists out of his country? Castro used to put all miscreants and criminals on boats and send them to Miami for the US government to deal with. But he let a terrorist into his country. How is it that people believe that the United States government can find Osama bin Laden in some random cave in the middle of a desert in the Middle East, but can't find Assada? So they can track down that terrorist, but can't find her. They found him in the middle of nowhere, but can't find Assada on a densely packed tiny island. In fact, she was in the States for 4 years. More BS. Her story follows the same synopsis as bin Laden's, which is funny, given that he also is a CIA agent, and Al-Qaeda is a fictitious government entity. Where did Assada get the money to make this cross-country trip? Since when does a black woman in America get to a white cop and not get imprisoned for life or shot dead? Never. Interestingly enough, like Tupac, Assada was educated through Roman Catholic Jesuit institutions. But I think in order for people to understand all of this, they need to dive into the origins of communism and what the civil rights movement was really about and who was really behind it. The BLA was nothing more than the CIA's way to draw attention away from legitimate Republican revolutions and to increase government control and intervention in the black community. Communism is one of the biggest and most long-standing hoaxes out there.
Those are people that don't know about the Black Panthers. Black Panthers were a militant black organization from the 60s that was handling their business in a major way. How has that affected you in terms of, it's made it to where, as I know, the police know who I am, the FBI, they already been all through my family, all through my house, all that. When I started talking some old rough stuff, they just like bombarded me and came all at me like I killed the president or something, because they couldn't slip the okey doke up on me. You know what I'm saying? I had knowledge of where I came from, so like I didn't just get black when Malcolm X came out. I had went through my stage of being mad. You know what I'm saying?
Tupac states how the Feds started coming after him because his mother was a Black Panther. He's lying. He's providing the public with some heroic platitudes, noble grandiose background stories, to give them the idea that he is a threat and a renegade against the establishment, who has been targeted since birth due to his bloodline. He's implanting the concept in the public's mind that his life has a quickly approaching deadline, that the government is on his back, that his activism is making them worrisome, and that he is carrying on the legacy of his family and predecessors. This is exactly how controlled opposition works. They inflate themselves as gallant heroes. They have cryptic and epic stories and backgrounds. They begin to pick up more and more mainstream coverage as their career progresses. Then they start to implant fear-mongering into public perception by telling everyone that they're getting targeted because of who they are, and then they end up assassinated by some lone wolf. Same game each time. Same with Assata, except rather than giving her a hoax assassination, they gave her some romantic Disney story about how she fled from the most powerful country on earth while carrying a life of imprisonment and a ton of felonies on her back. Assata is a CIA agent just like Tupac.
Chesimard went underground and then surfaced in the 1980s in Cuba under Fidel Castro's protection.
And then surfaced in the 1980s in Cuba under Fidel Castro's protection.
There is evidence Castro was an actor. Unlike Assata, he may be a better actor. He has a page at IMDb. How many other communist leaders have pages in the Internet Movie Database? He was an extra in several Hollywood movies, including 2 in 1946. Around this time the CIA was formed. So Fidel Castro was a trained actor prior to getting hired to play the role of a Cuban dictator. He is a part of the Marrano crypto-Jewish bloodline. This bloodline took over the Roman Catholic Church. Marrano crypto-Jewish bloodline are the people who created the W hand sign. It's called the Marrano hand claw. This is all connected because you have to remember that Tupac himself was named after a descendant of the Marrano crypto-Jew, a Spanish man who was trained by Jesuits, the revolutionary Tupac Amaru. But the Marrano crypto-Jews, they're a powerful group of Jesuits who control the Vatican and the US government, education, private sector, finance, etc. Fidel Castro was a good friend of Ernest Hemingway, who CIA now admits was an agent. Castro joined or co-founded the Party of the Cuban People in 1947, year one of the CIA. The party was also founded by Eduardo Chibas, who allegedly killed himself on the air in 1951 during a radio broadcast. He was a senator at the time and was only 44. His death appears to have been another fake. The next year Castro was allegedly involved in more uprisings. Although he stole guns from a police station, we are told that since they couldn't tie him to any of the killings with those guns, they let him go. Right. Go steal guns from your local police station and see if they let you go without prosecution. Even worse, go to a foreign country and steal guns from a police. Go to Colombia, steal guns from a police station, and see if they let you off like they did Castro. Castro again skated charges in 1950 when he was arrested for fighting with police. Charges were mysteriously dropped. In early 1952, Castro first ran for Congress, although it is unclear why anyone thought he was qualified to do so. Nonetheless, he met with General Batista only months before Batista took over the country. That's curious, seeing that Castro was only 25 and had done absolutely nothing important. His law practice was a failure. In 1956, Castro tried again, attacking Cuba from Mexico. Allegedly, Batista's forces supposedly attacked them, killing most of them. The remaining 19 went into the mountains during this time. Castro was interviewed by the New York Times and became a celebrity. Isn't that amazing? I never understood how Castro and his men were at war in the heat of the battle, yet the cameras were rolling. Stable shots as if no real rounds were being fired back. Notice a man shoot and run away while the cameraman stays in the same spot. The cameraman even had his back turned. Lights, camera, action. This is clearly staged. This guy even pretends to shoot. Watch how he gets down, cock back, and makes the shooting motion as if the gun had kickback. The camera cuts to a shot making it look like it's following the bullet's impact or distance. Someone, please tell me if this is a joke. It looks like a poorly produced sitcom. We are told Castro's men overran a military outpost in La Plata in 1957. Right. 19 poorly armed men overran a military outpost. Right. Only 3 months after being wiped down to 19, this group attacked a presidential palace in Havana. The story couldn't be any stupider if it included clowns. In short, large parts of the Civil War in Cuba were faked. They never happened, except in the history books which were written from Langley. Castro rose to power in 1959, not because he won any battles, but because he was picked by the US to head the puppet government in Cuba. This is all you need to understand that Castro and the entire event was a hoax. They aren't looking for Asada. They admit that the US has property in Cuba, Guantanamo Bay. They have a naval base on the island, but we are told that the US was just leasing it from Cuba.
We spend about $2,500 a year worth in gold. We send them a check every year in the lease. Castros have never cashed any of those checks on purpose. They've cashed a couple on accident.
The US has maintained that base throughout the 20th century, up to the present moment. Why isn't Cuba able to drive this US base off the island? We are told Cuba has wanted the base to close since 1959, but we just ignore them.
Cuba from the US naval base, which the United States has been leasing from Cuba since 1903.
Former Cuban President Raul Castro has demanded that the US return the land.
Maybe in our deal with Cuba, because we're probably paying rent.
It's funny hearing people say that Tupac and Asada are in Cuba hiding. Well, in that case it makes sense because they're all CIA agents, Castro, Tupac, and Asada. Castro is nothing but a puppet with absolutely no power. He's just a figurehead placed there to distract people from the powers that are situated above him. In conclusion, we have found another ludicrous story passed off as history. Castro's bio is another patchwork of inconsistencies and impossibilities. It is just more indication they think we are all idiots. Do you think real historians can't see what I see? Do you think thousands of college-educated wonks, as detail-oriented as any scholars, don't know what I have just told you? Of course, they know. Anyone who has bothered to read these bios and histories closely must know they are total disinfo. I put it that way because it means that all the historians are in on the con. They are all hired to shove this garbage down your throat. No historians ever tell you these stories are faked. No lawyer will ever tell you the court cases are faked. No artist will ever tell you the art market is a big con. No scientists ever tell you science is a hoax. So what does that tell you about the world? The illusion of reality, a smokescreen, a fairy tale written by twisted trolls.
Niggas is mad, I get more butt than ashtrays. Fuck a fair one, I get mine the fast way. Ski mask way, nigga ransom notes. Far from handsome, but damn a nigga tote. More guns than roses, foes is shaking in their boots. A visible bully. You should have been the cop, fuck hip-hop. With that freestyle, you're bound to get shot. The flame's about to drop, Here
comes a brand new flavor in your ear. Time for new flavor in your ear. I'm kicking new flavor in your ear. Like a brand new
It's Busta Rhymes the great, we bout to rip the tri-state, yo. Hey, hey, hey.